right, welcome to How China Works. In case you're new here, I'm Brendan Davis.
And I'm Yingying Li.
And we're your co-hosts. Our main goal is disambiguating any and everything we can think of that's good to know to best function in China, or if you're from China and need help navigating unfamiliar customs in the West.
Today's topic is who pays? As in, how do you deal with the bill at the bar or restaurant in different situations? And the short answer is, well, that depends.
Indeed it does. Depending on the actual situation, knowing who pays for drinks or a meal or a night out is absolutely an art as well as a science.
We'll talk about all that and much more, and also look at how this paying tradition works in the West.
Then we'll have a bit of a recap of the week and talk about what's coming next, so stay tuned. Okay, first let's set the stage for this in case you haven't made your first trip to China yet and haven't seen this in action. What's a typical scenario like towards the end of a meal here with, say, a group of friends?
Okay, when eating at a restaurant, I often see this situation. The check comes to the table, and there's a group of people rushing to pay the bill. People will often literally almost fight over who gets to pay it. The waiter or cashier is in a very difficult situation and just has to wait for the guest to sort it out.
Sounds familiar. And what's usually next?
In the end, the person who grabbed the right to pay the bill is full of pride, as if he had achieved great success. And this isn't limited to fancy nights out. You can even see this happen on the bus.
I know, really? It's just crazy.
Two people might rush to the coin box to pay their fare at the board, then one person pushed back the money of the other person, and they go back and forth for a few rounds before the coin dropped and get completed. It's like this.
Right. I wonder what the hell they're saying. What does that mean?
This is like, ami. Get away. It's almost done in a spirit of friendlessness. And it can also get ugly.
Note to the folks at home who think this is an exaggeration, one little word Ying just said is the key to understanding what makes China so different than the West in this regard. Gets. Every so often, there's a news story about two guys here who had too much to drink, and they get into an actual bloody fist fight with each other, all over who gets to treat each other and pay the bill from their previously fun night out. That's just bananas.
Yeah. That's not a great look for anyone, but it does happen. And the really crazy part is that it weirdly makes sense, but only if you understand the cultural background and some basic history.
I'll start with a little bit of an overview of this idea of paying when you go out with friends in the West to give some context. Now, first of all, when friends go out where I'm from, there's no one way that it works or one set of expectations. It's very common that groups of friends will go out and either pay for themselves or evenly split the bill, but it's also likely that one person will pick up the check as a treat for everyone else. The difference between the West and China is that when someone moves to pick up the check, there's usually a little brief protesting, but it's quickly accepted and then appreciated as a kind gesture.
That's nice. I appreciate myself. When you roll, as they say. And I like to treat too sometimes, especially among close friends.
Yeah, typically if good friends go out together a lot, one person will pick up the check and the other person will say, I'll get it next time. And then, of course, they do that in theory. That's usually how it works out. People don't worry so much about a sense of debt over such things. To us, it seems kind of silly and petty to keep score with people who are supposed to be really good friends and who you're going to see all the time anyway.
Okay, shifting the question a little. What if two friends like each other and want to go out, but have different financial situations? How is that handled?
Well, if there's a huge income discrepancy, there's kind of an unspoken rule that the richer guy or gal pays. Now, if you're not great friends with someone, you shouldn't take this for granted in a more casual situation or with newer friends, of course. But among people who have a deep history and affection for each other, or they just want to hang out, but they have very different bank accounts, one friend, the richer one, may invite the other person out as their treat.
We invite people out to treat them here too. 我请客. It means I treat.
好的. I love those words, and I like to say them too. It's nice to be able to do that. In the West, it's done specifically because someone knows their friend is not really able to go out themselves, and it's an easy way to get together with that person who might be reluctant to go out, for fear of embarrassment. And having been in a freelance world my entire life, I can tell you that money is very cyclical for people like me, and a lot of people I know. In an ideal world, of course, you have savings and investments and revenue streams that would give you some consistency for the basics. But I know plenty of people who year to year alternate, right, between like being fairly rich and then kind of poor in terms of what their actual cash flow looks like. Managing your finances in that kind of a situation is a part-time job, not just an afterthought. So for people like that, being asked out by a friend who's kind of wealthy at the moment when you're not is a very special courtesy, and it's really appreciated.
One last example of a Western courtesy is actually from Argentina. In their culture, no one is supposed to pay in advance, and all the people who share the meal are expected to be present when it's time to pay. The waiter tells everyone the bill, then they all share the expenses, fair and reasonable.
That sounds very egalitarian. Where I'm from, people usually split the check evenly if they're sharing, assuming that they had generally equal things. I mean, if you ate a fancy steak and had 3 sides, but I just had a coffee, we might have to talk.
It'd more like to be the other way around, right?
Yeah, maybe so, actually. Usually people divide it up with even math, splitting by the number of people there equally, and don't, itemize the individual French fries. Although every waiter I've known has a few horror stories about groups who've taken this egalitarian thing a little too far, and they debate about who had, a bite of this or etc. Life is too short for that.
Agreed. In Argentina, apparently this is their culture since ancient times. If you really want to invite the other party to eat as your guest, then invite them to your home and give them a big meal without letting them spend money. Therefore, they will learn to cook with their elders from childhood.
Very cool. And I've loved the little bit of Argentinian food I've had. Man, I'm getting hungry.
You're always hungry.
This is true.
Okay, then let's shift gears and talk about business. This is where we have more in common.
Right. Of course, in business, if you're inviting people out for a meeting, there's no question but that you're the one who's expected to pay. So that is something we have totally in common with China. And even the treated party will sometimes make a token gesture for the bill, but the main difference is that it is not a part of pride or honor where I'm from to seriously wrestle over the check in any circumstance. We don't have the same insecurities about indebtedness that are more natural here, which I know you'll cover in a moment.
Okay, that's friends and business in the West. Now, how about on a date? I mean, I know my own experiences, but this is where all of our differences across cultural, gender, and generational are probably most different.
I bet you're right about that, Smarty. Things have evolved a lot since I first started dating, way back before the internet.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a useful frame of reference, right? Back when I was young, the man always paid, period. End of story. Assuming, as we usually did then, that the date was between a man and a woman, and we were all living under more of a shared set of social norms.
Meaning people were much more alike?
Yeah, that's it. Back then, in a dating type situation, whoever asked the other person out was typically the person who pays. And in old school traditional man-woman relationships, there was an assumption that the man should do the asking. On a personal sidebar, I was really glad to see that whole who asks expectation change. It opened up the world for all of us, right? It gave shy guys a chance to meet girls who liked them, but they'd never really know how to ask out. And it also helped to level the playing field a little for all women in general. Anyway, historically, that was the first old rule to kind of go away.
I first went to the US after this was the reality, so I know women do a lot of asking. But as far as paying goes, I also understand the common assumption of most women in the West. If they are the one who has been asked out on a date, they're being treated. And having lived in San Francisco, a very open city in terms of romance, I believe the same idea works in same-sex relationships. It seems that the person who does the asking is doing the paying too, usually.
Nowadays, one difference is that if you're dating someone for a while, but not long enough that you're engaged or anything, it's not uncommon that a couple will either split a dinner bill or work it out in some other way, depending on the norms of their relationship. Maybe one person always gets the meal and the other picks up a movie or drinks later, that kind of thing.
Nice. For me, I want to respect the face of someone who might take me out and let him pay if he expects to, but I find other ways to balance things out. Maybe I've surprised him with a treat next time before he can pay, something like that. I'm East meets West. Remember?
Absolutely. And that's a new record amount of backstory and Western focus for us here. So having said all of that, let's look at the Chinese side of things now.
Right. So there are a handful of main Chinese reasons for this behavior that I want to talk about. First, there's a very real fear of owing someone something. The phrase to know here is 欠人情, owing someone a favor.
Yeah, Chinese people don't like that. There's a very strong feeling of self-sufficiency here, and avoiding indebtedness is a cultural trope that goes way back.
This kind of attitude is most often for dinners where everyone is not very familiar to everyone else. If the people don't know each other well and someone else pays for the dinner, it's a risk. The idea is, I don't know when I will get a chance to pay for it next time, so I'll pay for it this time. And if everyone is unfamiliar to each other, you definitely need to show mutual enthusiasm for paying.
Gotcha. What's next?
The second reason people fight for the check is to have a sense of superiority.
It's a showcase of supposed status. I'll just say it, it's done to show off. Kind of like those guys who think the key to a good dating profile is to have a Porsche in the picture instead of, having a good personality or something.
I'll take your word for that.
You can do that.
Now, in fairness, this happens mostly at class reunions. Think of people who come from a humble family, humble roots, but wants to show themselves off in front of their old classmates. Whoever grabbed the right to pay, they gain the superiority at the boss in the circle. Considering the social value of that superior positioning, what's a meal worth? Especially if there are beautiful female classmates present. A guy will work extra hard then.
No doubt. The third one relates to that. I can see from peeking at your notes there.
I totally couldn't tell. Yes, people will grab the bill for face and their personal image. This situation is very common. No one wants people to say that they are stingy. So in order to establish a generous reputation, they will pay the bill whenever possible. Whether it is a meal with a stranger or acquaintance, this kind of mentality exists everywhere. Most people love face, and they must grab the right to pay for the face.
And now we get to what's really at the root of the first 3 points, if we're being fair, the more deep-seated reason of boosting self-esteem. But this isn't all a negative thing, yeah?
You have to understand that avoiding embarrassment is super important to Chinese people. There's a long history of relationships and situations where we were not in control within our own country, so we're longing for safety, security, and a sense of belonging with friends and family. There's the term 见外. It means to regard someone as an outsider.
And Chinese people don't want to see their friends in a distant context or to be seen that way. So taking care of the bill helps to not only cement them in a group, it helps to make them the leader of the group, even if just for that night.
You've got it. There's another phrase that's good to know. 你太见外了. That means you're being too polite. Or we're colder than that, come on. We also like to validate people we introduce to a mixed group with 自己人. Basically, this person is my people. That gets people welcomed and included right away.
So back to what we teased a moment ago about this feeling that people have to pay for the face. According to people smarter than me about this, apparently it often does come down to inner self-esteem and uneasiness.
Right. Remember that the Chinese were poor for many, many years. The common greetings with people was, have you eaten 吃了吗? For a reason.
Right, we've talked about that on earlier shows.
Right. Now people's lives are much richer, but psychologically, there's still a fear and anxiety about poverty, which can lead to a complex of feeling inferior. To overcome this, people will rush to pay. This is the deep reason for that behavior.
Now, of course, grabbing to pay the bill can make the scene very embarrassing. So in order to avoid that, sometimes people will pay in advance. Or else they might excuse themselves to the bathroom, but really sneak away to pay before everyone expects the check is coming, which is pretty deep game stuff. I saw my former partner do this many times when entertaining clients or potential partners.
That's very smart. It shows that he knows how to build good 关系 and maintain harmony.
Well, he was an actual Chinese person, so he'd better. As we wrap up here, let's give a few smart tips to help manage these situations.
One is what we just talked about. When people are getting close to finishing, the host will excuse themselves to the bathroom and then pay. Know that he or she will do so quietly and not to make a scene to let the people who are invited to eat maintain good face or 面子 and not be embarrassed by a scene at the table.
Ironically, in the West, there's a little sensitivity around going to the restroom when it's expected the check will come for precisely that reason, the idea that someone is skipping out on their responsibility. That is to say, if the person who is expected to pay also needs to use the restroom near check time, it's expected they will likewise either pay the check while they're up or let the table know, hey, please leave it for me, if it arrives in my absence.
In other situations, like with a girlfriend or boyfriend, or with friends who see each other quite often, like really close co-workers, the most harmonious way to deal with this is to discuss it and have an understanding of how you deal with it. This is more of a modern approach, but couples who want to stay happy need to figure this out.
And in business, again, cross-culturally, this is where we have the most in common. The host or inviter generally pays. And one last simple rule of thumb is that if you are the guest of a Chinese person or company in their hometown for the first time, there is basically no chance that they will let you pay even if you ask for the meeting. It's just how things are done. Usually.
Good tip. Thanks, Brendan.
Okay, this was our longest show so far. We're getting some serious practice in for season 2, though, which will feature longer shows.
Sometimes there's just a lot to say, so we're rolling with it.
This week we covered a lot of ground as far as making friends is concerned. We talked about doing it online, offline, in business, and in purely social situations.
We also discussed the brotherhood and sisterhood feelings that develop between very close friends here. Your best friends are basically family, more than ever before.
Next week, we're jumping to yet another subject entirely, the unique characteristics of Chinese millennials.
I know a few things about this myself.
Yeah, you be one.
There's a lot to say, and I'm excited to get into it with you.
For now, it's been a big week and we're almost out of here. Please visit HowChinaWorksPodcast.com or your favorite podcatcher to see what you might have missed out on.
Don't forget to rate, review, share, or subscribe to the show, and feel free to give us feedback on the website too. Especially if you have a funded project or program or endeavor you think we could help you with, please let us know. And there's a page called Work With Us, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we would. That's all for this week. I'm Brendan Davis.
And I'm YINGYING Li. See you next Monday on How China Works.